On June 25, 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn etched itself into American legend as General George Armstrong Custer's heroic last stand, a golden-haired cavalier, saber flashing defiantly atop a Montana hill as thousands of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors overwhelmed his men in a tide of dust and fury. Immortalized in paintings, novels, and films, this romantic image of tragic sacrifice has long dominated the story, embodying manifest destiny and frontier bravado. Yet miles away, amid the same chaos of gunfire and swirling dust, another epic unfolded, one history has unfairly forgotten or vilified. This is the untold story of Captain Frederick William Benteen, a grizzled, pragmatic veteran born in 1834 in Petersburg, Virginia, was a blunt, reliable officer in the 7th U.S. Cavalry, known for prioritizing his men's lives over glory, unlike his flamboyant commander, George Armstrong Custer. During the Battle of the Little Bighorn on June 25 to 27, 1876, Custer divided his regiment to attack a massive Lakota and Cheyenne village along the Little Bighorn River. Benteen, commanding about 125 men from companies H, D, and K, received vague orders to scout southern valleys for fleeing warriors. After a grueling, fruitless reconnaissance through brutal terrain, finding no enemies but a gruesome abandoned camp, Benteen turned back to rejoin the main force. En route, he received Custer's urgent note via trumpeter Giovanni Martini. "Come on, big village, be quick, bring packs." Instead of delaying for the slow pack train, Benteen hurried toward the sounds of battle. Arriving around 2:30 p.m., he found Major Marcus Reno's command in panicked retreat after a failed assault, repulsed by warriors led by Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gal. Benteen immediately halted his battalion to cover the fugitives, then merged forces on what became Reno Hill, about 350 men total, facing over 1,500 warriors. Assuming effective command as Reno faltered, Benteen directed frantic fortifications using saddlebags, crates, and dead horses as barricades. His cool leadership, disciplined fire, and resourceful tactics, including water runs under heavy fire and ammunition redistribution from the arriving pack train, held the ridge through a 36-hour siege of relentless sniper fire, probes, and attrition. Survivors like Private John Ryan and Dr. Henry R. Porter credited Benteen's unshakable presence with saving them, repulsing waves despite severe casualties, thirst, and distant sounds of Custer's annihilation. Relief arrived on June 27th from Generals Terry and Gibbon. In the aftermath, as the nation mourned Custer and over 260 dead, public outrage scapegoated survivors. Benteen faced accusations of cowardice, insubordination, and jealousy, stemming partly from prior grudges like the 1868 Washita incident for not rushing directly to Custer. The 1879 Reno Court of Inquiry amplified these attacks, but Benteen's report defended his pragmatic choices. Consolidating with Reno against overwhelming odds was the only viable option given vague orders, exhausted troops, and treacherous terrain. Modern scholarship, archaeology at the battlefield, revealing intense fighting on Reno Hill, and survivor testimonies have vindicated Benteen as a masterful defender whose actions exemplified resilience and sound judgment amid Custer's overconfident division of forces. His stand influenced military doctrine on improvised defense and asymmetric warfare. Benteen continued serving until 1888, earning brevets for gallantry, though marred by personal struggles. He died in 1898 and was reburied at Arlington. Once overshadowed by Custer's myth, Benteen's story now stands as a testament to quiet courage in the fog of war, a forgotten sentinel who held the line when all seemed lost.
His competence, Benteen's actions that day have been perpetually shrouded in controversy, tangled in a web of accusations ranging from betrayal and insubordination to outright cowardice, fueled by the public's need for villains in the wake of national humiliation. What truly transpired on that sun-baked ridge? Why has posterity judged this steadfast commander so harshly, often reducing him to a footnote or a scapegoat in Custer's shadow? To unravel this, we must journey back to the sweltering dawn of June 25th and trace the threads of command, chaos, and courage that defined Benteen's ordeal. Let's delve deeper, beyond the myths, into the raw, unvarnished reality of the fog of war. It all began, as so many disasters do, with a single, fateful order from Custer himself, a directive born of overconfidence and the pressure of a high-stakes campaign. The 7th Cavalry, part of a larger expeditionary force under Brigadier General Alfred Terry, aimed at forcing the non-treaty Lakota and Cheyenne bands back onto reservations, had been pushing relentlessly through the Badlands of eastern Montana Territory for weeks, their scouts reporting signs of a massive Indian encampment swelling along the greening banks of the Little Bighorn River. By the morning of June 25th, after days of grueling marches that left men and mounts alike footsore and parched under the relentless prairie sun, Custer's regiment crested the bluffs overlooking the valley below. What they beheld was staggering: a sprawling village of over 1,700 teepees, teeming with an estimated 7,000 to 9,000 souls, including some 1,500 to 2,500 warriors under the charismatic leadership of Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall, a far cry from the scattered bands Custer had anticipated. Undeterred by the scale, the ever-bold tactician, fresh from Civil War triumphs and eager to eclipse his rivals, devised a pincer plan to envelop and crush the village before it could react. Major Marcus Reno would lead a frontal assault from the south across a shallow ford, drawing the defenders' attention. Custer himself, with 5 companies, would swing north to strike the encampment's rear, and Captain Benteen, 3rd in the chain of command, would take the remaining 3 companies on a reconnaissance sweep through the southern valleys. To the left, to intercept any fleeing warriors and secure the flanks, ensuring no escape routes for the enemy. Benteen's orders, relayed verbally amid the hurried preparations, were characteristically vague, yet laced with Custer's typical urgency. Go to the left, to the head of the valley, and pitch into anything you come across. If you find Indians, charge them. If not, rejoin the main trail. He was also instructed to dispatch a swift scout, Lieutenant Edward S. Godfrey, with a handful of mounted men to the forward bluffs about 5 miles ahead, reporting back any sightings of hostiles or valleys that might harbor them. With his battalion veterans and green recruits alike, their blue uniforms caked in dust, carbines slung across pommels, and sabers rattling at their sides, Benteen plunged into a landscape that seemed conjured from the depths of a fever dream, a labyrinth of arid hell that tested every ounce of endurance. The terrain was unforgiving in its brutality, sheer crumbling ridges of yellow ochre clay that rose like the spines of some ancient beast, plunging into jagged ravines, choked with thorny scrub and loose scree, where a single misstep could send horse and rider tumbling into oblivion. There was no merciful shade from the blistering June sun, which hammered down like a blacksmith's forge, turning the air into a shimmering haze and baking the ground into a powder fine enough to choke the lungs. The men, many of them Irish and German immigrants, press-ganged into service, were already exhausted from the preceding day's forced marches up to 80 miles in scorching heat with scant rations of hardtack and salted pork, their horses lathered in sweat, flanks heaving, hooves cracking on the flinty soil as they stumbled forward in a ragged trot. As Benteen's column pressed deeper into these southern valleys, threading through coulees where the wind whispered omens through the buffalo grass, the first omens of chaos began to emerge, casting long shadows over the expedition's fragile morale. About 10 miles into the scout, after scaling bluffs that offered panoramic views of endless, empty horizons, no valleys teeming with braves, no distant puffs of smoke signaling a village, Benteen encountered the remnants of an abandoned native encampment, its conical teepees still standing like spectral sentinels against the skyline, their hides fluttering in the breeze. But it was the grim tableau within that seized the men's hearts with icy dread. The mutilated bodies of massacred villagers, likely non-combatants caught in the crossfire of earlier skirmishes or retaliatory raids by U.S. forces, sprawled amid the debris of shattered cook fires and scattered belongings. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid reek of recent fires. A visceral reminder that this was no abstract hunt, but a plunge into the heart of a living, breathing conflict where innocence paid the price of empire. The sight shook the soldiers to their core, stripping away any illusions of a swift, clean victory. Private William Taylor, a young recruit from Company H, would later pen in his trembling hand a dispatch that captured the collective pall. We knew then we were in deep. The air felt heavy with death, like the valley itself was mourning, and every shadow seemed to hide a Sioux arrow. Morale, already frayed by thirst and fatigue, plummeted into the abyss as the stark reality clawed its way into their minds. They were profoundly alone, adrift miles from Custer's main force in a vast expanse of hostile territory, with no clear path forward and the sun dipping inexorably toward a blood-red horizon. Whispers rippled through the ranks, rumors of vast war parties, of Custer's folly in dividing the command, testing the fragile bonds of discipline that Benteen, ever the steadying presence, worked tirelessly to reinforce with curt words of encouragement and iron resolve. After hours of this fruitless, soul-sapping scouting, having covered perhaps 15 miles in the punishing heat, with horses faltering and men slumping in their saddles, Benteen, drawing on his wealth of experience from the guerrilla-haunted trails of the Civil War, made a critical, pragmatic decision, interpreting his orders as fulfilled in the absence of enemy contact. He wheeled his battalion back toward the main trail, paralleling the Little Bighorn, aiming to rejoin the column before nightfall. His men were bone-tired, their canteens nearly dry, lips cracked and tongues swollen from the alkali dust that coated everything like a malevolent shroud. Pausing briefly at a shallow morass to water the animals, a mercy that took less than 15 minutes, but refreshed both beast and rider, Benteen pressed on at a brisk trot, the distant thunder of gunfire from Reno's direction growing faintly audible, like the rumble of an approaching storm. It was then, in a moment pregnant with destiny, that a lone courier, trumpeter Giovanni Martini, Custer's last messenger, galloped up from the rear, breathless and wide-eyed, clutching a scribbled note in the adjutant's hasty hand. "Benteen, come on, big village, be quick, bring packs, W.W. Cook, P.S., bring pass yes." The message, marred by the telltale missing K in packs, throbbed with urgency, a desperate summons from the heart of the fray. Yet it was maddeningly opaque. Where precisely was Custer? What scale of big village demanded such haste, with the pack train laden with vital reserve ammunition and supplies lagging at least 5 or 6 miles behind? Burdened by the uneven ground, Benteen faced an agonizing calculus. He did not turn back for the mules. Instead, honoring the spirit of the order, he spurred his men onward in a stiff trot toward the sounds of battle, the terrain conspiring against them with every rut and rise that clawed at their speed. From a vantage atop a final bluff, the valley unfolded in horrifying clarity. An immense throng of warriors, their war ponies kicking up clouds of dust, charging down upon dismounted figures in Blue Reno's command, fracturing under the onslaught while the survivors fled in ragged panic toward the bluffs on the right bank of the river. When Benteen finally crested the river's edge around 2:30 p.m., after what felt like an eternity of bone-jarring pursuit, he found not the triumphant banner of Custer, but a scene of utter pandemonium. Major Reno's battered remnants, their faces etched with terror, retreating in wild disarray up the steep bluffs after a botched assault on the village's southern end. Reno's men, reduced from 140 to perhaps 100 able-bodied, were bloodied and shell-shocked, coats torn, weapons clutched like talismans, having been repulsed by a furious counterattack that turned their ford crossing into a slaughter pen. Ponies lay gut-shot in the shallows, the river running red, and the air vibrated with the triumphant whoops of pursuing braves. Reno himself, pale and trembling, accosted Benteen with a plea that bordered on desperation. "For God's sake, Benteen, halt your command and wait until I can organize my men." Seizing the moment, Benteen complied without hesitation, deploying his 3 companies to shield the fugitives, providing the reinforcements Custer had promised, but failed to deliver a lifeline that Crow Scout White Man runs him, later credited with saving Reno's command from total annihilation. If those soldiers hadn't turned back and been reinforced by the pack train, they would all have been killed. The Sioux were coming up fast. The situation was dire beyond measure, a powder keg on the brink of explosion, and it was about to ignite into the inferno of full-scale siege, and it was about to get far worse as the valley's defenders, sensing vulnerability, swarmed like a living storm. On a high, windswept ridge overlooking the sinuous curve of the Little Bighorn, now etched into history as Reno Hill Benteen assumed de facto command with the cool precision of a man who had stared down death too many times to flinch. Merging his fresh battalion with Reno's shattered survivors swelled their combined ranks to about 350 men, a fragile bulwark against the tidal wave of retribution crashing toward them. Over 1,500 Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, their faces painted in ochre and vermilion, feathers streaming from braided hair, rifles and lances glinting in the sun, orchestrated by the tactical genius of Crazy Horse's flanking maneuvers and Gall's ferocious charges. The odds were not merely staggering, they were apocalyptic, a David versus Goliath mismatch amplified by the defenders' intimate knowledge of the ground and their fury at the invaders' audacity. Benteen's tactical instincts, honed on the blood-soaked fields of Missouri and the ambush-strewn plains of Kansas, ignited like a spark in dry tinder. He barked orders with clipped authority, directing his men to dig in with frantic urgency, improvising fortifications from the detritus of desperation, bulging saddlebags piled into breastworks, splintered ammunition crates lashed together with bootlaces, the bloated carcasses of fallen horses dragged into service as ghastly barricades against the onslaught. The ridge's elevated perch offered a slim tactical edge, a commanding field of fire over the approaching slopes, but it was a desperate gambit at best, exposed to enfilading fire from the coulees below. As the first volleys cracked, the air bullets whistling like vengeful hornets overhead, arrows thudding into the parched earth with meaty thwacks, the true horror of scarcity revealed itself. Water rations dwindled to sips from muddy canteens, the summer heat turning wounds septic in minutes, and the wounded began to pile up in moaning heaps, their cries a cacophony that clawed at the defenders' sanity. The ensuing defense on Reno Hill was nothing short of a testament to raw human grit, unyielding ingenuity, and the unbreakable camaraderie of men forged in shared peril, a microcosm of frontier warfare's savagery where every breath was a defiance of fate. Private John Ryan of Company K, a wiry Irishman who survived to pen vivid memoirs, later evoked Benteen's aura with reverent awe. Captain Benteen was like a rock amid the tempest, unmovable and eternal. He kept us together when panic clawed at our throats and we thought ourselves done for, whispering prayers to saints long forgotten. Under his orchestration, the lines held with disciplined ferocity. Sharpshooters like Sergeant James Paul picked off advancing braves from prone positions, their Springfield carbines barking in rhythmic volleys that forced the attackers to weave and dodge, while others in acts of valor bordering on madness volunteered for near-suicidal dashes to the river 400 yards below, bellies exposed to a hail of lead and feathered shafts, returning with precious canteens sloshing against their thighs amid weak cheers from the barricades. Benteen himself stalked the perimeter fearlessly, his gray eyes scanning the haze for weaknesses, reallocating ammunition from the belatedly arriving pack train around 4:30 p.m. A godsend of 100,000 reserve rounds that staved off collapse while exhorting his men with gravel-voiced resolve. Hold your ground, lads, make every cartridge a grave for the bastards. Some soldiers, their rifles barreling too hot to touch, resorted to cooling them in the scant puddles or passing spares hand to hand in a relay of desperation, their fingers blackened with powder burns. Yet amid this frenzy of survival, the real agony gnawed deeper than bullets or thirst. The distant, sporadic crackle of gunfire echoing from the north, likely the death throes of Custer's isolated command. Miles away on the bluffs, taunting them with phantom hopes, Benteen, his face a mask of tormented calculation, confronted an impossible moral crossroads. Abandon the ridge to rally to Custer's unseen aid, risking the annihilation of Reno's remnants and dooming the packs to capture, or fortify here, preserving a nucleus of resistance against the encroaching dusk. With a heavy heart, informed by the scouts' dire reports of thousands more warriors massing, he chose the latter to hold the line at all costs, a decision rooted in duty's cold arithmetic, but one that would shadow him like a curse for the remainder of his days. The siege that followed was a protracted nightmare, stretching through the blood-orange twilight of the first day and the interminable hours of the second, June 26th, a relentless grind that blurred the line between endurance and madness. The native warriors, seasoned tacticians in their own right and wary of the entrenched positions' killing fields, refrained from a suicidal frontal assault, opting instead for a symphony of attrition, sniper fire cracking from concealed ravines, probing rushes by small war parties to test the lines, and opportunistic volleys that shredded horses and pinned the defenders in place. Benteen, adapting on the fly, corralled the surviving mounts and mules in a shallow depression at the hill's center, a saucer-like basin ringed by dismounted troopers, throwing up earthworks with tin cups and bayonets while rotating shifts to allow fleeting moments of rest amid the din. Casualties mounted mercilessly. Corporal Thomas Lull, Private Henry Meader, and trumpeter William Jones fell in the opening salvos, their bodies hastily covered with saddle blankets. 21 others, including the unflinching Sergeant Paul, the brothers Bishop, and the indomitable Henry Windolph, lay bandaged and feverish, their groans mingling with the lowing of wounded stock. Benteen himself escaped lightly, a glancing graze on his right thumb, the heel of his boot shredded by a Sioux bullet possibly fired by the famed White Cowbull, but his 2 U.S. mounts were struck, collapsing in sprays of blood that stained the chalky soil. By sheer bone-deep determination, amplified by Benteen's unshakable presence, described by Dr. Henry R. Porter as the true linchpin of command. With Reno reduced to a spectral figure, his men repulsed wave after wave, their guidons snapping defiantly in the wind as a beacon for the absent Custer. Yet the toll was grievous. Dozens dead or dying, the air thick with the stench of cordite, offal, and unwashed fear, their cries a haunting dirge echoing into the star-pricked darkness as Terry's relief column finally crested the horizon on the morning of June 27, scattering the besiegers like smoke on the wind. When the dust of battle finally settled, and the survivors' gaunt phantoms in tattered blue were extricated by General Alfred Terry's and Brigadier General John Gibbons' converging columns on June 27, the nation reeled in collective shock and grief, the telegraph wires humming with outrage from New York to San Francisco. Custer and over 260 of his men lay mutilated on the field, their command eviscerated in a matter of hours, a catastrophe that shattered the myth of U.S. military invincibility and ignited a firestorm of recriminations. The public, voracious for heroes and villains in equal measure, demanded swift answers and equally swift scapegoats to salve the wound of humiliation. Fingers of blame thrust unerringly toward the survivors, and none more so than Benteen. Why, the chorus thundered, had he not spurred hell for leather to Custer's aid upon receiving that frantic note? Was his delay a symptom of jealousy toward Custer's fame, a festering grudge from the 1868 Washita massacre, where Benteen accused the general of abandoning Major Joel Elliott's beleaguered detachment? Or worse, a coward's hesitation, a traitor's sabotage in the heat of glory's pursuit? Newspapers like the New York Herald pilloried him as the man who could have saved Custer but chose to cower, while dime novelists spun lurid tales of insubordination, painting Benteen as a sullen antagonist in the epic of American hubris. The nadir came at the 1879 Court of Inquiry in Chicago, a theatrical inquest convened to dissect the disaster under the glare of public scrutiny, where Major Reno, despite his own evident collapse under pressure, was largely absolved of culpability, his testimony laced with self-exculpatory vagueness. Benteen, summoned as a witness, endured a reputational crucifixion, his cross-examination a barrage of insinuations that his reconnaissance had been a dawdle, his pivot to Reno, a dereliction born of malice. Critics, echoing the anti-Benteen faction within the 7th Cavalry, argued that his failure to break through immediately upon Martini's arrival, despite the exhausted horses, the obscured terrain of tall grass and rolling bluffs, and the pack train's tardy arrival, doomed Custer to isolation, sealing the general's fate in a cascade of what-ifs. Yet as the fog of post-war analysis clears, the evidence paints a profoundly different portrait, one of reasoned valor amid impossibility. Benteen's orders from Custer were perilously vague, the terrain a treacherous maze that confounded couriers and concealed movements alike. His official report of July 4, 1876, penned in the raw aftermath, lays bare his logic with unflinching clarity. "I did all that was humanly possible with the men and means at hand," he wrote, detailing how returning for the packs would have exposed them to capture while a fight raged, and how joining Reno's superior in rank and evident distress was the only viable path to consolidate a defensible position against 900 veteran warriors. Letters unearthed from his correspondence, including a visceral missive to his wife on July 4th, reveal a man tormented not by guilt, but by grief and contempt for Custer's hubris. "I'm only too proud to say that I despised him," Benteen scrawled, referencing the washed-up betrayal, yet his margin notes mourn the fallen, like Custer's brother Boston and nephew Reed, underscoring a soldier's conflicted loyalty. Modern scholars, armed with the scalpels of archaeology and historiography, have rallied to this vindication with mounting conviction. Figures like John S. Gray in his seminal Custer's Last Campaign, and battlefield archaeologists poring over Reno Hill's scarred earth, uncovering hundreds of spent .45-70 cartridges embedded in the soil, arrowheads lodged in barricade remnants, and the skeletal remains of horses attesting to a 2-day maelstrom, affirm the ferocity of Benteen's defense as a masterclass in improvised resilience. Survivors' testimonies, untainted by the inquiry's politics, exalt his leadership without reservation. Private George W. Glenn etched in his diary, "Without Benteen, we'd all be dead on that hill, our bones picked clean by the crows," while Lieutenant Edward S. Godfrey lauded his fearless stalking of the lines under the hottest fire, crediting Benteen with orchestrating the counterattack that blunted Gall's final probe. Even medical officer Dr. Porter, who tended the carnage firsthand, declared unequivocally, "Although Reno was the ranking officer, Colonel Benteen was really in command, and to his coolness and bravery, those of us who were saved owe our lives." Let's dismantle the myths brick by brick. Benteen was no traitor slinking in envy, no coward shrinking from duty. He was a commander crushed beneath the anvil of unimaginable pressure, juggling fealty to his immediate charges against the spectral imperative of aiding Custer, whose divided tactics and underestimation of the foe's resolve sowed the seeds of calamity. History, in its eagerness to anoint Custer as the tragic paragon of martial virtue, recast Benteen as the convenient foil, a villain in a narrative too tidy for the battle's labyrinthine truths. But nuance demands we see him whole. A flawed mortal? Yes, his blunt tongue and documented rivalry with Custer bred no love lost, but one whose choices, scrutinized in the crucible of context, emerge as the epitome of soldierly prudence. Benteen's stand at Little Bighorn, far from a mere footnote, etched an indelible mark upon the annals of military evolution, its echoes reverberating through doctrines and academies for generations. His tenacious defense of Reno Hill, transforming a vulnerable bluff into an impregnable redoubt through ad hoc engineering and rotational fire, illuminated the perils of parceling forces across hostile, communication-poor terrain. A lesson that U.S. commanders, from the Philippine insurrection to the sands of Iraq, would heed in adapting to asymmetric warfare. The battle in its totality morphed into a perennial case study at West Point and Sandhurst, dissecting not just tactical missteps, but the psychological frailties of command. How overreach invites nemesis, how vague directives breed disaster, and how the sine qua non of clear, redundant signaling can mean the gulf between triumph and tomb. Benteen's after-action maneuvers, including the guidon, display feint to signal Custer, and the corralled livestock tactic to shield reserves, influenced field manuals on improvised fortifications, underscoring the valor of the holding action in multi-pronged operations. In the contemporary era, a renaissance of rigorous scholarship is at last according Benteen the laurels his deeds warrant, peeling away the varnish of Victorian-era hagiography to reveal the multifaceted commander beneath. Archaeological excavations at the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, leveraging ground-penetrating radar and forensic ballistics since the 1980s, have mapped the density of fire on Reno Hill over 2,000 artifact clusters, corroborating a sustained 36-hour engagement, while advanced analyses of primary sources, from Benteen's terse reports to the oral histories of Lakota descendants like Black Elk, recast the battle as a symphony of contingencies rather than Custer's solo tragedy. Fresh biographies, such as Brian Roberts' Saving the Last Stand, portray Benteen not as a saint or sinner, but as a skilled pragmatist who maximized a bad hand. His post-battle career, spanning another dozen years in the saddle, burnished this legacy through the 1877 Nez Perce campaign, where his brevet to brigadier general on February 27, 1890, honored gallantry at Canyon Creek alongside Little Bighorn, a promotion to major in the 9th Cavalry in 1882, and service at remote outposts like Fort Duchesne, Utah, until a 1887 conviction for drunk and disorderly conduct stemming from the era's brutal isolation earned a suspended sentence, commuted by President Grover Cleveland. He wasn't flawless. His documented clashes with superiors, his rheumatism aggravated irascibility, and that unyielding candor that alienated peers. But Benteen was brave to his marrow, resourceful as a fox in a snare, and fiercely loyal to the troopers who called him the idol of the 7th, as one 1877 dispatch proclaimed. Frederick Benteen shuffled off this mortal coil on June 22, 1898 in Atlanta, Georgia, at the age of 63, his body felled by the cumulative toll of rheumatism, heart disease, and the ghosts of Montana's bluffs. Initially interred in Westview Cemetery, his remains were later honored with reburial at Arlington National Cemetery, a quiet restitution for a life of shadowed service. His legacy, long eclipsed by Custer's gilded myth, the poems, the monuments, the endless reenactments, now beckons for reevaluation in our own fractious age. It is time, emphatically, to reconsider. Benteen's stand on that ridge was no footnote in someone else's epic, but a standalone saga of defiance, a raw affirmation of human resilience when the world conspires to crush the spirit. History, we must remind ourselves, is no simplistic yarn of unalloyed heroes and cardboard villains. It is a rich, textured tapestry woven from the warp of complex choices, the weft of fleeting courage, and the inevitable fraying of sacrifice under scrutiny's gaze. So the next time the clarion call of Little Bighorn tolls in conversation or classroom, be it the clash of cultures, the hubris of command, or the inexorable march of empire venture beyond the legend of the golden-haired martyr, pause instead to honor Benteen, the forgotten sentinel, the blunt-hearted captain who held the precipice when oblivion yawned wide, his battalion a bulwark against the storm. In the swirling fog of war, where illusions multiply and truths dissolve like mirages, the unadorned reality is often the most elusive quarry. Let us pursue it now with clear eyes and steadfast hearts, lest the echoes of Reno Hill fade into silence once more.